I have to tell you, I do travel around the country quite a bit, and I'm not exaggerating. I haven't seen anything like Signature, and I've learned a lot. But I'm here today because I think we're in a new phase where it is these terms at the front are at the core of strategy. It's not only a good thing to be pushing these goals, it's a smart thing to be pushing these goals, but it's a difficult thing. So what I'm going to try to do in my time is to sort of lay out why we have to do it, what is it that we actually have to do, and then how do we actually get it done. We are at a time where like business as usual really is breaking down as a viable model forward. And it's not the unpredictability that's coming out of Washington, D.C. today. It's not Obamacare. It's really the force of history. I think that I would summarize, the panic attack that many people on the hospital side in particular, but the provider side in general had. It goes something like this. The government payer market share is going up. People are, there's more and more Medicare, there's more and more Medicaid. The providers I know, the market share is going up of government payers about 1.5% per year. And meanwhile, commercial contracts are increasing much more slowly. If they're increasing at the rate of inflation, that's actually pretty good. There are a lot of places where commercial contracts are completely flat. At the same time, costs are going up, especially for pharmaceuticals, but personnel, they have to have increases that help them keep up with inflation. And meantime, most of the margin for healthcare institutions, whether they're large physician practices or hospitals, most of it's coming from a small number of services which are generally outpatient, generally commercially insured, and those services are the ones that are most vulnerable to competition. Everyone kind of knows competition is a good thing. Everyone wants competition for everyone else other than themselves. The right thing to do, the smart thing to do, is to plunge into competition. But what does it mean to plunge into competition, to lean into it and embrace it? The fact is, those barriers that have made competition really something not present in healthcare compared to other business sectors, they're crumbling. And healthcare is becoming, in many ways, more like other business sectors. And some of the evidence that the barriers are crumbling, there's an increased percentage of dollars that are tied to value. Market share is starting to move. For institutions that have developed bundled payment programs, I am on the board of Geisinger. We're one of those Walmart centers of excellence. It was just a trickle of patients that were coming, like one or two a month. But that trickle has turned into a stream now. Walmart has, as some of you may know, Walmart has picked 6 sites as centers of excellence for spine surgery, total joint, cardiac surgery, and so on. Geisinger was one of them because of both a good price but also very good outcomes. And also data showing that about 30% of the patients who were sent to Geisinger after they were evaluated, they said, you don't really need spine surgery. And that actually was one of the things that was most important to Walmart in picking Geisinger. But hardly anyone came for the first couple of years. But now Walmart has said that if you're a Walmart employee and you need spine surgery and you don't go to one of the centers of excellence, it's out of network. And out of network means you pay 50%. So suddenly it's a steady stream of spine and so on that's making their way to Danville, Pennsylvania, and Virginia Mason and Cleveland Clinic and the other centers of excellence for Walmart. The framework that Limor and I put forward in our article is that healthcare needs competition. We need it at every level. And the 3 distinct levels that we put out there is we need competition when consumers pick health plans. Limor was a very strong arguer against the mergers that were being discussed last year between Anthem, Humana, Aetna, Cigna, and so on. We actually need those plans not to be offering choice and trying to be innovative. We need competition when patients pick doctors. And we need competition when doctors and patients pick the hospitals where patients are going to go for their higher end care. We need people constantly pushing to get better, constantly pushing to make care better able to meet patients' needs, constantly pushing to figure out more efficient ways of meeting those needs. Restless, constant pushing. Regulation doesn't drive that. Competition is what drives that relentless search. The competition for market share, meeting patients' needs and grabbing them and holding on to them, it puts the focus on what really does matter, which is improving actual outcomes of patients. And frankly, we're moving into a marketplace where you have to do that efficiently or you're not going to be in the game. Mike Porter, who I think many of you know his work, he's a business professor at Harvard Business School. Many people consider him the icon who invented the concepts of strategy in the 80s and 90s. And we wrote this article because the modern concepts of strategy that are seen in most business sectors have not been necessary in healthcare as long as the amount of money that was going in was increasing. What you needed to do to thrive in healthcare up until this era has been operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness, the distinction between that and strategy we make on this slide, it's like doing a better job. What we currently do is learning best practices, is taking waste and unreliability out of those processes, attracting, retaining good people, working really, really hard. Believe me, those are real honorable things. And Mike and I both feel operational effectiveness is 90% of management. You can have the most brilliant strategy in the world, and if you don't have excellent operational effectiveness, you're in big trouble. You're not going to be able to succeed in all likelihood. But in the old era, what you needed was operational effectiveness and a brand to get people in the door, and you were going to probably thrive. In this era, we think that operational effectiveness is more in the department of table stakes. It will enable you to survive. But if you're going to thrive, you're going to need something more. You're going to need strategy. And strategy boils down to, the core of strategy is making choices. And as I said, we don't like to make choices in healthcare because we don't like conflict. The ability to make choices is something that's hard, but choices really can and should be made guided by strategy. They shouldn't be guided by politics. If the choices are guided by the two core questions, which are at the center of strategy, then you can really build consensus. And those two core questions are, what are you trying to do for whom? Who's your customer? How are you creating value for them? Well, how is their life better because of what you've done? And in healthcare, that means how are you improving things for patients? And then the second question is, how are you going to be different? Healthcare today is where business was 100 years ago. We're organized around function, surgery, medicine, et cetera. It reflects medical science, what we do, what we know, as opposed to what groups of patients need. And it's reinforced by the fee-for-service system. And what transparency does is it puts the focus not on the numbers, how you've been rated. It puts in the past, it puts your focus on the next patient you see. It makes it clear every encounter with a patient is a high-stakes interaction. It's always been high stakes for patients, but now it's high stakes for you too. So my conclusion is that the shift from volume to competition on value, I think is happening. It's transitioning from rhetoric to reality. Organizing around meeting the needs of patients is becoming a strategic imperative. Providers are going to be rewarded if they can improve value from the perspective of patients, meet their needs, and do so with increasing efficiency. We know if you meet patients' needs and you do it more and more efficiently, you're going to be okay. I can't tell you exactly what your books are going to look like, but if you do those things, you're going to be okay. And if you don't do those things, who knows what's going to happen. And to do it, development of social capital is going to be a competitive differentiator. So I think the principles that I hope I was bringing up, I think they cross settings. Now, they might get applied in different settings, but trying to improve value, compete on value, trying to improve, that's true everywhere. And I think everywhere you have to segment patients, organize real teams, and have financial and non-financial incentives to reward improvement in actual outcomes. I think that figuring out how those apply to where you work, I think, is a smart thing strategically for anyone in healthcare. I do think culture is huge, and I'm like not a soft, squishy guy. I mean, I was a cardiologist, like, you know, sticking catheters in people not that long ago. But this stuff it really matters, and I think there is stuff known about how do you build culture. And you know, one line that I use all the time now is no stories without data, no data without stories. You know, stories are engaging emotionally in ways data can never be. And if you can't find a story about why these data are important, then you have to wonder, are these data important? And so a lot of organizations are making sure every time they give a report, they say, okay, and here's why this is important. There is like, stories are what create the vision for what you're trying to do, where you're going to try to go. I think measuring outcomes that matter and being transparent with them. Transparency makes us so nervous in healthcare because we know we can't control everything, but transparency is good. And, you know, and the arc of history is toward transparency, and the faster and further you go compared to your colleagues, you know, the better. So I'm measuring what matters, putting it there. I would just say transparency as a core value is, you know, it's a smart way to go. I mean, it's like a subsidiary to these other terms: competition, value. You know, it's the one thing I push, it's transparency.